There she is. All right. So, welcome everybody. So, my name, if you don't know me, I am Lara Johnson. I'm a certified life coach for Christian women that feel called to something more. And I love books like we were just talking about just a few minutes before. So, today's book club book that we're doing is The Alchemist. And this is one of those, like, when you look on Amazon, you're like, how many reviews does this have? This one has like 65,000. So it's a very well-known book. It's been around for a long time. What I wanted to give just a little bit of history on the book is that when you read about the author in the very beginning, he has a very cool story that he shares, that he wrote the book in 2 weeks. Like, that's amazing. One, to write a book, two, to write it in 2 weeks. But he said it just felt like this was his story. This was part of his soul. And then he went and took it out into the world, and the world handed it back. That's essentially what happened. And for so many of us, I feel like when we're figuring out our calling, that's really what it feels like. Is sometimes we feel so passionate about something and we start moving towards it, and it's almost like the world doesn't accept it and it hands it back. But he didn't give up. And that's what's really cool, is that now it's one of the most popular books. It's an international bestseller. So I want you just to really give yourself that permission that if you've tried things in the past, that's okay. If you feel like you're different, or your gifts, people don't recognize your gifts, or maybe you don't even recognize the gifts yourself, that's okay. This is the right space to talk about this through the book of The Alchemist. So I always like to start this is how you know that this is like the book club for you. Okay. Because these things are going to stand out to you. So if you ever feel like you really love your life, but there's something stirring inside of you and you feel almost restless, like you're being called to something, you're in the right spot. If you tell yourself or your family that you need a break, but then you take a break, like a vacation, or you go on a girls' night and you come back and almost instantly you're back frustrated with your life. If you love if you love checking things off your to-do list, but you don't feel like you're checking enough things off, and so you start writing things in to check off, like things you've already done, just so you can put a mark next to it. If you believe you're too busy to accomplish your dreams, that's a huge one. Like if it just feels like there's too much going on in life, or it's not the right time or season. If you tell your kids that they should go after their dreams, if you tell them that it's okay to make a mistake and failure is part of the learning process, or if you tell them just put yourself out there and people will love you for you, but you're not doing it yourself, you're in the right book club. Well, all of this we're going to talk about. If you question if you're depressed, now I'm not talking like you can't get out of bed, but if you're like, I kind of feel like there's something off about me, and you're not really sure what it is. Okay. If you're looking at social media and everybody's life seems really perfect, but then you start telling stories and okay, it's not that perfect. They probably have really hard things going on in their lives. And you make up all these traumatic stories about how their life is probably hard and not that perfect. Or if you're too tired for sex, for playing with your kids, or for self-care, all of these things are signs that you are in the right book club. So most of the time we get to the spot where we think the solution to all of these things is to volunteer more, to take another vacation or a girls' night, to learn how to time block, to buy a new planner, to give up on our dreams until our kids are older or out of the house, to cut out all social media, to go on more date nights, to spend more time with your kids. This is what I want you to really see, is that at this point, you have a thought that doing more will create the result to help you achieve whatever it is that you feel called to do. When in reality, doing more actually causes you to feel more overwhelmed, to feel more burned out, and more resentful. Okay. Because doing more is not the answer. And this is why The Alchemist is such an amazing book. Okay. Because what it's teaching us is that being more of who we are, of moving more into what our calling is, and into trusting God and the world around us, that's when we start realizing that we can answer our call, is when we be more of who we're meant to be. That's when we answer our calling. That's when we feel more fulfilled in our life. That's when we're working more hand in hand with God. And this is hard because this is not talked about, which is why this book is so famous, because it's speaking to the very soul that every single one of us has. Okay, so we're going to draw a little picture, and all of the returning people know that I cannot draw. So you're going to get some really, really elementary drawings. Okay, so the story starts with a shepherd boy. And he does have a name, Santiago. But what's interesting is they never reference his name besides the beginning. It's always the boy. So he starts out with his sheep. Okay. Here's his sheep. I told you I really can't draw. Okay. That's a sheep, if you can't tell. And he is going to visit a town where there is a girl that he has a crush on. That's like what his plan is. But he stops and he spends the night next to this big sycamore with these roots that go underneath. And at this point, he has a dream that he doesn't understand. He has a dream that he is playing with a child. The child has approached the sheep, and suddenly this child transports him all the way to the pyramids. And he had never seen the pyramids. He was a poor shepherd kid, that was walking around. So he's by this church by the sycamore. Okay. So at this point, he's really confused and he really wants to know the answer to his dream. Okay. So throughout this, he is going to try and make this so we don't go off the screen. Okay. And we're going to put the pyramids over here. So he has this dream. So he goes and he meets with a gypsy. He's like, well, why not? We're going to go meet this gypsy and she's going to read my palm. She's going to interpret my dream. Everything will be solved. I'll be able to know the answer to this dream. So he gets to this point and he meets the gypsy. And this gypsy is floored by this dream. She says, I don't know what the pyramids are, but you have to go there. And when you go there, you're going to find your hidden treasure. And when you get there, I want you to come back and give me 1/10 of all the treasure that you find. And he starts laughing. He's like, okay, that's ridiculous. Completely brushes her off. Okay. So he continues on to go back to this village to meet this girl that he has a crush on because he knows his life would be really good. So I want to stop here for just a second. Okay. Because when we get to this spot, we will always find people in our life that can see our vision for ourselves, but we're not invested in what they have. They haven't asked for something in return. And it's like we're not invested. It's like when your friend tells you, like, I can see you doing amazing things in your life. And you're like, thanks. That's really great. Like, we don't believe it because we're not invested in it. It's like, okay, well, yeah, that's really great. I'm glad you could see that for me. Okay. So he goes on and he's reading and he comes across an old king. Now, what is so fun about this book is he meets so many interesting people. And when you're moving towards your calling, you will meet some of the most cool people you've ever met. So he meets this old king and he's like, okay, who's this? He thought he was just an old man. Who's this old man bothering me? So at this point, the old king starts, and his name is Melchizedek. And if you're familiar with the Bible, you'll know that Melchizedek was also a prophet. So I think it's very cool to see some of the links here with biblical terms. So this old king, he starts talking to him about this dream and this hidden this hidden treasure that he's supposed to go after, but he had never told the king anything about this. And so he was kind of taken back. So at this point, the king starts introducing a couple concepts to him. The first one is a personal legend. And what the king tells him is that every single person has a personal legend. Okay, we're going to write this down here. This is going to be our terms that you're going to hear within this book. And the way he describes it is the personal legend is something that we always wanted to accomplish, something inside of us that we dream about. Like before we were afraid of what would stop us in life, we were very like we were just living in our dreams. It was something we wanted to do. So if you have a pen and paper, I want you to stop and I want you to think about this for yourself. So before you judged yourself for your dreams, before the world told you you couldn't accomplish it, what was the thing you wanted to do? So you can go to your pen and paper. If you're comfortable going over to the chat box, what's the thing that you used to dream about doing? Okay. So think about that for yourself. I know when the very first time I read this book, I thought about like, what's the thing that I'm scared to tell people I want to do? And at the time, I really wanted to learn Six Sigma. Okay. Six Sigma is like it's a way for businesses to look at systems and processes. And it was very intriguing to me, but it made no sense for a stay-at-home mom to figure out Six Sigma. I couldn't like, why was that but that was something I was really fascinated in. Something else that I used to dream about was being a motivational speaker. There was something about like being able to move people to better their lives. Like I was so embarrassed to ever tell people that I wanted to be a motivational speaker. So go to whatever it is and think about you. You can go over to the chat box. What is the thing that you're scared to tell other people? Maybe it's something that it's like coming into fruition and you're grabbing onto it a little bit more, but you're still kind of scared. You can go over to the chat box and share that. So at this point, the old king tells him, like, you have a personal legend. This dream is for you to go towards this personal legend, to go, oh, for Robin, yes, writing a book, motivational speaker, we're all in good company here. So the old king tells him, okay, you need to go to the pyramids. And this is how you're going to do it. You need to go and sell all of your flock, all of your sheep, and you're going to pay me 1/10 of it. And at this point, he had no reason to trust the king. He had barely met him. And the only thing he knew was that king understood something he felt inside of his heart. And so he kind of sat on it. He stewed on it. He was mad about it. Like, why would this strange man ask me for this? And he was not thrilled about it. But he knew that he had to make a choice by the next day. And he did. So he sold all of his flock and he gave the king 1/10 of the proceeds. And he said, it was so crazy. Like I went to my friend wanted to buy all of my sheep and it worked out perfect. And he introduced the old king introduced something called I don't want to change the words, the principle of favorability, which is also what we call beginner's luck. He said, as soon as you start on your personal legend, the whole universe will conspire to help you on that journey. And you'll have that bit of beginner's luck. And we've all had this where we've started a business, we've gone back volunteering, we have this brilliant idea and things come together and we feel so good and passionate about it until hard things start to happen. And then we start to question the decision. So we're going to get to that in just a second. So he says, the reason why I needed to charge you 1/10 of this was because I had to force you to make a decision on whether or not you were going to live your personal legend. And this is what's so cool, at least for me, like as a certified life coach, I want everyone in the world to know what I teach. It is life changing and I charge people for it. As a Christian woman, that was so hard for me in the beginning because it was something that changed everybody's life. But I knew that people would not take me serious, going back to the gypsy, if they don't invest and make a decision for themselves to follow their personal legend. And so I always tell my clients, like, that is your first transformation, is to pay money to make the decision to follow your calling and to do the work to put yourself on that journey. And that's hard to do. I'm not going to lie. So when you get to this point, he paid it. He decided to, get a ticket and go all the way to Spain. So once he got to Spain, he was going to need to continue on to the pyramids in Egypt. He had no idea how long this distance was. He didn't know like how hard it was going to be, but he trusted himself. So he made a choice. And that's where I want you to really see, like, choice is one of the most critical things we have to do in order to accomplish our calling or our personal legend. So he made a choice and he went to Spain. Once he got to Spain, he met a very nice friend that was so friendly with him, and he had all his money that he was going to use. And this friend told him he would be his guide. And when they were in the marketplace, this new friend stole all of his money and left him completely destitute out in the middle of nowhere in a country he didn't even speak the language. And he talked about in that moment of like, oh my gosh, God is so unfair. And for any of us that have ever moved towards our calling or felt prompted to do something, we've all been there to where we get mad that God is unfair. Like things are really hard. But what was interesting was he finally decided, like he sat with that, kind of like got really frustrated. He had no idea what to do. But he realized, he said, I'm in this strange country and I'm a victim to this horrible robbery. And then he paused for a second and thought about his personal legend. And he had a shift in that moment where he said, this isn't a strange place, but a new place. And I'm not a victim. I'm an adventurer on my way to my personal legend. That shift alone changed everything for him. That's what moved him forward. Time and time again, he got to huge obstacles. Okay. And the only way he could move beyond these obstacles was to recognize what his brain was starting to tell him, that God was unfair, that he was a victim. And he could have stayed in that place, but he never would have achieved his personal legend. The only way to move forward is to learn how to work with your brain and to process how it's viewing the world and to work with it and change the way you think. So then he got to where like, he's like, okay, well, in this strange country, I've got to figure things out. I have no money. He wasn't totally sure he was going to continue the journey, but he knew he needed money. So he went to the merchant. There was this merchant of a crystal shop. And this merchant at the crystal shop he just didn't seem like he was selling a lot. And they were all dusty. And he thought, okay, well, I don't know what I can do in this country, but I do know a few things that I could do. And that's I could just go and dust the crystal. So he went to the merchant and he said, these are pretty dusty. This is probably why you're not selling anything. I'm just going to dust it. Will you pay me? I got to get back to my country. And this merchant had sympathy on him and they became really good friends. He worked for this merchant for quite a while. I think it was almost a year. But throughout this time, he started seeing ways that he could provide value. Now, this is absolutely critical when we are looking at accomplishing, like discovering our treasure, looking at our own personal legends, is we will want to spend all the time researching everything we need to know. When we do that, we're not doing the things we already know and using the skills we already have. And so at that point, that's when he really had to go back to what is it I can do? He could be a shepherd, but he didn't have any sheep. I can dust glass. Great. I have really good ideas. So one of the ideas he had was to go out and put the tea in the crystal and sell tea so people would want to buy the crystal. Suddenly, the merchant was making more money than he had ever made in his entire life. And the interesting thing happened, and this will reference, some of the other book clubs that we've done, was the merchant knew this was more success than he ever had before. And he started getting really worried about it. And at one point, the boy, like, what are you worried about? This is more money than you've ever had. He said, because sometimes dreaming about things is better than actually living them. This was the merchant's. He had a fear that living his dreams would never be as good as dreaming about his dreams. And I want you to really get clear on that for yourself, okay? Because this will be critical for you as you're answering your calling. I am a big dreamer, okay? I have lots of ideas. There are so many things that I want to do. And it is easier to stay dreaming than it is to make choices and overcome obstacles. But this will never lead you to answering your call. This is where I go back to like the very beginning. If you find that you have a lot of ideas, but you're not moving forward on them, or if you're not failing, you are never going to achieve your personal legend and find your hidden treasure. So at this point, he got the money from the merchant. He was able to save up. He was going to go back to his country, go get his really ugly sheep right there. He was going to go buy some really great sheep, and he was going to go live his life and be happy. And he could have done that. But there was something in him that was unsettled, where he felt like he had to keep going. So again, he made another decision. He had another choice to make, and he chose to continue. This is so critical. Over and over again, God will invite you to keep making choices to stay on this path. It is not easy. I will tell you that this is the most uncomfortable part, because you know you could live a good life there, but we're not here for good. We're here for great. God has a mission for you. And by doing this and going through the discomfort of these choices, this is how you get there. So at this point, he goes and he joins a caravan. He has to cross the desert. Okay. And he meets the Englishman. So again, he meets somebody really interesting. So he meets the Englishman. And the Englishman is on his way to this oasis to meet an alchemist. And the boy had never heard of what an alchemist was. And this was actually really fun. So I looked up, was alchemy actually real? And there were a lot of people that practiced alchemy, which is to take lead and to study the properties of this metal and to transform it into gold. So what was cool about like an alchemist, this is back, many years ago, an alchemist viewed metal very differently. They viewed metal as different stages in the development or the refinement process on its way to spiritual perfection. So gold being that perfected state for this metal. So when you go back to, the beginning and the journey that he's going on, finding our personal legend isn't just about having the treasure at the end. It's a refinement process to achieve that spiritual perfection for ourselves. So every single time you're encountering a choice and obstacles and people along the way, they are there to help refine you and develop you into your most perfect state, the state that God sees for you to accomplish that mission he has always had ready for you. So he goes along this, and with at this point, hold on, let me find this because I wanted to read this to you. At this point, he goes with the Englishman and they start to cross the oasis. Let me see if I can find this page really quick. Okay. Oh, here, actually, I'm going to go back. So on page 70, if you do have the book, this is going back to talking about choices and decisions. He says he was able to understand one thing. When making a decision was only the beginning of things. When someone makes a decision, he is really diving into a strong current that will take him to places he had never dreamed of when he first made the decision. That's why we have to make decisions. And that's why we have to go through that discomfort. So then he goes on. I'm going to read this part to you as well. Let me find, sorry, I should have tabbed these, earmarked. So he starts learning a whole bunch of different things. So he said, so he's starting to cross with this caravan and he is meeting all these people. So he's talking to the camel driver, and the camel driver was telling him all of the challenging things that he had experienced while being a camel driver and everything that had fallen apart in his life. And he was still happy. And this is what the boy was talking to him about, like, how in the world have you overcome so many things? And he said, here is what disaster has taught me to understand the word of Allah, or God. People need not fear the unknown if they are capable of achieving what they need and what they want. And so that's the next thing that I wanted to point out, is that there is a belief of being capable that has to exist. These are the beliefs you have about yourself, that maybe you don't know how you're going to get to your hidden treasure, but you trust that you are capable to keep moving forward. As long as you believe and trust yourself that you are capable, the fear of the unknown will never hold you back. So I want you to really take some time to build some beliefs about you as an individual and your capabilities. So we're going to just pause for a second. I want you to go to your pen and paper, and I want you to write down, what are some of the things that you are capable of? And this will be uncomfortable for a second, because Oftentimes women don't want to look at themselves. We have beliefs that it's like overly confident or braggy or prideful, but that's very different. It will feel different to your body. When you truly believe you are capable, it comes from a very loving place. Okay, so write down what are some of the things that you know you are capable of. And I'll give you just a second. Okay, and if you want to, you can go over to the chat box as well. Tell me some of the things that you are capable of. Because if you know these things, you will not fear the unknown. You know you can work through whatever comes your way. Okay, so keep writing those down. You can go over to the chat box. I'll come back in just a second. So he continues on, and they start to find that there are tribal wars that are going on in the desert. Now, these are very dangerous back in the day when nobody knew where anybody was. It wasn't like they had the technology to know when the next military people were coming to attack them. So they had to, snuff out all the fires. They had to sleep in the desert in the dark. And it was uncomfortable for everybody in this 200, 300 person caravan. And it caused a lot of problems for them trying to get to this next spot for them. So at this point, I'm going to read this other part. So when it starts to get hard, because it will, it's not a matter of if, it's always a matter of when. He talked about this. Let's see. Oh, where did it go actually? So okay. So it says, when you're moving towards your dream, it says you're going to constantly be subjected to tests of your persistence and your courage. So he says, never stop looking for the signs and omens that God has placed in your path to let you know you're going in the right direction. So that's the next thing is I want you to really see, like anytime we're moving towards our calling and things get hard, what our brain will naturally do is start doubting that we're on the right path. And you'll see and experience this, and it will be very subtle. It will sound something like, what am I doing? I'm taking too much time from my family. Or it will sound very noble, like it's just not my time or season in my life right now. Now, that's not to say people don't change and God calls them in different directions, but you've got to be onto your brain that anytime you're moving towards a calling, that you will be asked to be persistent and you will be asked to be courageous. And God will show you signs and omens, as they talk about in the book, that you are on the right path. Someone will say something to you and it will like sink into your soul. It'll be like an answer to prayer, or you will open up the scriptures and you will read something that will speak directly to what you're struggling with. These are signs and omens from God that you are moving in the right direction. And the more you look and the more you see those, the more you will trust to keep going on your path. So this is what kept happening with all of these tribal wars, is he was learning this lesson of signs and omens from God, and that he had to be persistent and courageous. So they finally get to the Oasis, and he meets a couple people there. Fatima is the woman he falls in love with, and he also meets, I'll talk about that in a second. So he falls in love with Fatima while he's at this oasis. And he knows that he could stay at this oasis and be happy forever. Now, I want you to really think about this for yourself. Has there ever been a time in your life where you felt you needed to give up on your dreams because you fell in love? It might be with a partner. It might be with children. It might be with a job where you just felt like you had to let everything else go by the wayside. If that has happened, I want you to really challenge your beliefs and spend time talking with God on if you are to continue moving forward on this personal legend. So as he's talking with Fatima, she's up here. He learns a very critical lesson that love will never hold you back from your personal legend. In fact, love will magnify your ability to accomplish it. And that is one of the most critical things, because at this point, he almost gave up. And Fatima was able to encourage him that love will always be there, but that your journey needs to continue on. God is calling you to this mission. So then at this point, he sees a vision. I'm telling you, this is like one of these like really crazy books. It's a really fun. It's a very fun read. So at this point, he sees a vision, and this vision he has when he's out in the desert is of a war coming to the Oasis. Now, the Oasis, what he talks about in the book, historically has always been a safe place, a place where nothing can ever happen. Like it's very neutral. It's a neutral space. But he sees a vision, and that he sees war happening at the Oasis, and it scares the living daylights out of him. And what I love about this experience is that he didn't discredit what he saw. He started going and telling people. And then those people started telling people. And then it just like continued on to the point where he got to the very chief of the Oasis. And the chief said, "This has never happened before." He goes, "I don't know. I don't know why I had this vision. All I know is that I had this vision." And the chief threatened his life. He said, "Okay, if war happens tomorrow, great. We are going to give you money. You are going to have status at the Oasis, and you will survive. If war does not happen tomorrow, then we are going to kill you." I don't know about you. I don't know if I've ever trusted my visions that much, but that would be very intimidating to stand by what you see in your visions. Now, I want you to take this. Now, for most of us, we're never going to have this point where our lives are going to be threatened for a vision that we see. But what I do see when all of my clients all the time is that when they are working towards their callings, they will have people make comments to them. "Are you sure you want to do this? Really? Like, this is really hard. Why are you putting yourself through this?" And it's never from an ill-intended place. It's always from a place of like protection and love, but it is questioning the vision that you see for yourself. But that vision is for you to hold and for you to trust God going forward. So he has this vision. Next day, war happens. And because he told people, they were all prepared and his life was spared, he gained a lot of rank and status within this Oasis. Again, all of these opportunities he had to be really successful, but he wasn't there to be successful. He had a personal legend, a mission for him to accomplish. So he continued on, and at this time is where he met the alchemist. Now, at this point, the alchemist is the one that starts teaching him on a completely different level. He starts showing him this development and refinement process of who he is. So they start traveling together, and during this, he's going to learn one of the most critical lessons that every single one of us has to learn, and that is to listen to our heart. So as they're traveling towards the pyramids, the alchemist is going with him. He starts talking about how your heart becomes your compass. And you have to listen to your heart, because your heart is part of the soul of the world. He talks about this a lot, how there's like this universal language, this language of the world that doesn't use words to speak, but that this language of the world exists because the soul of the world is alive. Like every living, breathing thing, it all has space in God's kingdom. It's all energy. It's all part of us. And so the alchemist teaches him that in order to fulfill your personal legend, to make it this last little bit, you've got to start understanding what your heart is saying and listening to what doesn't have words. And this is a very unique space in your personal legend. And I watch my clients go through this, where they have been taught to love other people, to serve God, to do all of these things, but in the process, not meaning to, in order to help so many people, they forgot to listen to their own heart. They forgot to stop and see what is the path that God has for them. And the second they start awakening that soul within them, they're able to love and exist on a much deeper level. They're able to accomplish their calling, but it takes stopping and listening to their heart. So at this point, the boy starts talking about, and if you do have the book, this is a very critical spot to read. It's on page 120. Let's see. I wrote down to, I think it's 132 is when he starts talking to his heart. And you'll see and experience this for yourself, where he first touches, like he gets in touch with his heart and he's like, my heart is agitated. He's telling the alchemist. He says that his heart feels like he's been a traitor to him because he's had so many good things. And his heart was a little frustrating. He had to give space for his heart to be a little angry for a minute. And then he started talking about, well, I haven't been listening to my heart. So my heart's angry that I haven't been listening. And the alchemist says, yes, like that's what happens to everybody. If you don't listen to your heart, it will start repeating the same thing over and over and over. That's why so many of us will feel like there's something calling to us and it's painful to our soul. It's because our heart is trying to get us back on track with our personal legend. That's why it hurts when it speaks. So getting in touch with what your heart is really saying is the only way you will ever achieve your calling, because this is how God speaks to us. If we are ever to accomplish our mission on this earth, it is to get in touch with the language and how God speaks to us. And that comes through our heart. So he goes on, they continue on. And at this next point, he comes across the military. And the military say, I think the alchemist said something like, oh, there's no worry here. Like, you don't need to worry about us. We're magic. We can turn ourselves into the wind. This guy's going to show you how. I love that. Like, the alchemist just like threw him under the bus. Like, and for so many of us, like that could be really like, for him, he's like, I don't know how to turn myself into the wind. And so this is the lesson that I really want you to see. And it's a beautiful passage when you go and read at this spot in the book. At this spot, his thought was, I'm not afraid to fail. I don't know how. I don't know how to turn myself into the wind. And the alchemist would not have it. He did not indulge in the I don't know how at all. He said, well, you better figure it out. And that's exactly what he did. So it never shares exactly how he did in the book. Some miracle happened. He was able to perform this amazing miracle because he got in touch with his heart. He was speaking the language of the world. He really got in touch with God, and this miracle happened. And so that's what I wanted to like point out at this spot. Like, what is the lesson that we take away? And it's not always that we're afraid of failure. Our brain is convinced, like pound its fist on the table, like, I don't know how. Like, you get so frustrated. But the more frustrated you get, the less you are to hear God. And the less you are willing to give God that opportunity to perform a miracle in your life. When we are moving towards our callings, when we're accomplishing our personal legends, we are asking for God to work miracles in our lives. And if we're so determined that we don't know how, we will never hear God's voice or see the miracles he is performing. So they were able to work through the military. He was on the home stretch. He's like, I'm there. The alchemist sent him on his way. He was almost there. He could see it, and he got there, and he started digging for where he thought the treasure was. And guess what happened? He didn't find a single thing, not a single thing. I should also warn, spoiler alert. Yeah. So there was nothing. He didn't find anything. And at that point, he encountered some robbers. The robbers came and said, what are you doing? He's like, I'm digging for treasure. So then the robbers started digging for treasures, and then they were mad that they didn't find anything. And then they beat him up and left him to die. At this point, he is at the pyramids. He is supposed to find his hidden treasure, and it is not there. And as the robbers walk away, this is what I love, okay? Because this is exactly like what it feels like when we achieve our calling. He says, it is supposed to be here. And the robber says to him, I had a dream once, and my dream told me that back at a church, under a sycamore, there was hidden treasure, and I was supposed to go and find it. But this is what he says, but I'm not stupid enough to cross an entire desert just because of a recurrent dream. And at this point, the boy just starts laughing. He just starts laughing that all this time the hidden treasure was here. And at this point, this is when he realized that he had to go through this journey. He had to be able to get back to find the treasure here. All of these obstacles, all the decisions he's made, all of the people he met along the way, they were pinnacle to his refinement process. And then he was able to go back. He was able to dig up and find more treasure. Here's my little treasure box. He was able to find so much treasure. And he even says that when you're on your personal legend, God is more generous than you ever could have imagined. And he got his treasure, went back, fell in love with, well, he was already in love with Fatima, but he was on his way back to go marry her. So what are the lessons? Like, what is everything that we can take away from this? We are literally on a refinement process. Wherever you feel like you are in your personal legend, know that in order to keep moving, you've got to be making choices. You're working through the obstacles. You're getting in touch with your heart so that you can hear the voice of God guiding you on this path. The other thing he talks about in this book is that everything builds on each other. He had to learn each of these lessons. And with it, every lesson that you learn, there will come a point where you have to test that lesson to see if you've really learned that. So within each of these, the tribal wars, trusting himself, turning himself into the wind, what he was doing was he was being tested to prove every lesson that he learned. And the closer you get to your personal legend, to your hidden treasure, your calling, whatever you want to call it, you will continue to be tested. Your brain will tell you to abort. Your brain will tell you that you are on the wrong path and that these are signs. So how do you work through that? That right there, that is critical. There is a difference between our mind and our heart. And if we are just listening to the stories of our brain, if he would have just said, at any given point, I can just go home, and then he would have. But he felt something deep in the soul of his heart. This is why it's critical to know your behaviors that you do when you're out of alignment. This goes back to the very first list. If you love your life, but you feel restless, if you are writing things on your to-do list, but not doing them, or you're writing things in just so you can cross it off, there is a place where you are out of alignment with your heart. If you feel burned out by the life you have and you're not feeling energized and motivated to keep going, you are out of alignment with your heart. All of these are invitations for you to get back in touch with whatever lesson, whatever calling God has for you. So we're going to take just a second. Tell me what questions you have about this. Go over to the chat box, tell me a question or tell me something that has stood out that matters to you and your personal journey. I'm just going to give you just a second to do that. Okay, so as you're writing, hopefully you got a picture of my really amazing drawing. You can take a screenshot. So this, I want just to share with you that this is everything. When you start knowing who you are and who you're meant to be, things feel different in your life. You get very clear on what your calling is and you start moving towards it. Suddenly your home is in a place that you're discouraged and overwhelmed. It becomes a place that supports you in your journey. Suddenly you start becoming more confident and more alive. you're less overwhelmed in your life, and you're less resentful over other people's success, but that you're calm and confident, you're grounded in this, and you're taking the lessons and you're building on them. All of this is what I do with my clients. I take them through this journey. And as a certified life coach, that's something I see them literally like wake up to the world around them to get back in touch with God. This is everything, because the second you reach your personal journey, whatever your treasure is, it will be more generous than you ever could have imagined. There are things that only you can accomplish in this world, that your unique ability God has saved for you to do. And when you accept that calling, when you start on your own journey, you start to learn lesson after lesson, and it becomes more and more crystal clear on how you're going to get there. Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple of these. Okay, so Becky, hi Becky, you're living out my dream, but had to move to take care of family. That's a huge obstacle, Becky. And being able to see how can that obstacle still be part of your life and still be living out your dream. And sometimes it looks different than we ever thought. And it's getting in touch with God and asking him, how can these two things marry together? What dream is it? What personal legend do you have for me that I can do while I'm taking care of my family? I think that's so important. Betty, you said you're still trying to figure out God's vision for your life. That's so many of us. Maybe you're at the beginning and you're feeling something, but you don't know what. Yes, like really take that to God. Pray about that. He will show you. I am very confident that he will show you. Let's see, that I love the concept of our own hearts are part of the energy of the world. I love that too. Thank you, Solana. That's truly what I believe, is that we are all connected, and that that we were all written by the same hand, the hand of God, the world, us, our hearts, all of that, we're intertwined, so that we truly are living within the energy of the world, and the energy and the soul of God. Has been a confirmation that when there is something that I feel strongly about, things are just right to do. I should do it regardless. Yes, completely, Robin. Yes, I'll holler on that one. Yes, that when there's something that you feel strongly about, you move forward on that and trust yourself and trust all of the signs and the omens that you see along the way. It's like a breadcrumb that God is leaving for us to keep moving forward. So I hope that you've been able to take away something from this book for yourself. It really was one of those books for me that like really woke me up many years ago to what I'm feeling isn't wrong, but that this is everything that's right with me, that God is calling me to more. And this is the process that I take my clients now through. I learned and I studied it for myself. I developed my program where I take clients through this process. If this is something that has resonated with you at any point, if you feel like you are ready to move forward on this journey, please reach out to me. This is my website. It's www.larajohnsoncoaching.com. There's no U in the L, so just be aware of that. And when I go through this process, there's three things that I do with my clients. The first is always discovering who they are and who they're meant to be. Within there, we start learning how to work with your mind, just as we talked about. If we don't understand our mind, we can't hear our hearts. So in there, we start learning how our mind is working. We start understanding our body and learning to work with both of those things so that we can see and hear our hearts. From there, we start really getting clear on what are the obstacles that are holding you back and how do we work with those things and still move forward, which moves us to that second step, which is achieving goals, learning how to make decisions, empowered decisions, not ones that you sit and question yourself over and over, then ask everybody's opinions on, and then not do it and research some more. Like, I would not recommend that decision-making process. I was in that for a lot of years. But I realized that in order for us to ever achieve our personal calling, we have to know our decision-making process and learn how to make those decisions, because that's how we achieve goals, is they're just making decisions. So from there, that's when we really start building out what is our beliefs, what's our courageous creed that we outline together, so that you always have something as you're going through these obstacles, that you have something to lean back on, beliefs that you have that keep you grounded and strong through this process. From there, you'll start having success. You'll start moving through this personal journey, and you'll start self-sabotaging. Just as he got to every single one of these points, he had huge success and he could have stayed. At that point, I see so many of my clients thinking, I'm there, like I'm good. And learning how to teach them that to enjoy the happiness and the life that they have while still moving forward, not sabotaging the success that they're having because it feels uncomfortable. So if that is something that resonates with you, if you are ready to step into that, if you're ready to start your call, like to discover where you're calling and get started on that, please send me an email. Go to my website. I offer free consultations, and they're 60 minutes, and you will get very clear on what this path looks like for you and how you're going to get there. And whether or not we work together, that one call will be the difference in everything for you in your own life. So I'm going to leave just a couple questions at the end. We are going to be doing our book drawing. So type out your questions and yeah, go over there. Any questions that you have, let me know. And I just realized, oh, here it is. The Four Agreements. This is the book we're doing next month. It's another like top seller that you will hear in all the self-help groups. You know, everybody's always talking about how everybody needs to read the Four Agreements. It's talking about really figuring out that personal freedom in your own life and getting in touch with all of the things that you feel strongly about, that you want and desire in this, that your heart is calling you to, and how to actually achieve them. So Four Agreements. So we're going to do, I had that drawing, hold on. Okay, so Tanya, let's see, Tanya, are you on? Okay, just go over and comment. Just tell me, Tanya, you get a free book. You get to pick if it's either, if you want Audible or a paperback. So I will email you and you can let me know what you want. And yeah, it'll be really fun. Okay, Tanya, woohoo. Okay, perfect. All right. So Erin, oh, the Four Agreements changed the way I think. It is life-changing. Yay. I always want to find books that are really going to make an impact, like a big splash in your life that you can take away and have some kind of transition in your life. So I'm glad that that's the perfect one. So Tanya, get ready to have your life changed. All right. So we are going to come back next month. It will be the fourth Thursday. I'm not sure exactly what day that is, but it will always be 3 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Mountain time, unless it's like Thanksgiving. Then we'll change the date a little bit. So be on the lookout for the email of this recording. Please feel free to send it on to other people that you know. I love, like, again, like this is something that I'm so passionate about. I want people to know all of these things. So this is just a value that I love putting out in the world. So feel free to share the recording with other people. And I will see you all next month. Thank you very much for coming.